Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for participating in the Ontario Provincial Music Festival. You have all been recommended by your local community festivals, and I just wanted to take a moment to show my appreciation for those service clubs such as Kinsman, Kiwanis, Rotary, Lions, the Optimists, or whatever individuals or community groups have sponsored those community festivals. We're very fortunate in Ontario that some of those festivals have been going on for nearly 100 years. I'd also like to thank the donors who give scholarships and awards that encourage and support the individuals who might want to go forward, such as yourselves, to the next level of competition. And I would like to say that sometimes these local music festivals produce professional performers. Oftentimes that's where people get their start and go on to use their music in as their profession. The classes I'm going to speak about today are the duet classes from the primary, elementary, and junior levels. So there was only one entry in each of these classes, but they were all immensely entertaining. I was delighted and somewhat humbled by the level of talent that I was asked to comment on. So I'd like to begin by talking about the expectations of singing a duet. Duets can be two voices singing continuously in harmony, or perhaps two voices singing individually and then coming together occasionally in harmony. So first and foremost, it's important to honor what is in the score. The notes, the rhythms should be exact, and then decisions should be made about dynamics, tempo changes, and any of those editing remarks that are in the score. And sometimes they don't always suit, so it's okay to scratch them out and not do them. But it's important to explore them because most of the time the composer has thought long and hard about what he'd like to hear. And it's a good idea to try that. It's also very important to make sure that the onsets and offsets, the beginnings and ends of words and phrases come off or begin exactly at the same time. And I know that is something that you have practiced carefully with your teachers and your directors. And the other thing is, of course, taking breaths at the same time. So I'm happy to say that you were all very conscientious about these preliminary expectations of singing duets. So the next important thing is the blend of the voices. And usually young voices blend quite easily together, but occasionally there's a natural forward placement of some young singers that can be a little challenging to adjust. So you have to consider how to match the vowels, especially on long notes or when the voices come together in unison. Sometimes when the pitch of an interval or even on a single note is absolutely exactly in tune, you will feel and hear a sort of special ring or vibration. And it's quite exciting and wonderful. You suddenly think, oh, this is special. Our voices are really echoing together. So I could hear this happening a couple of times, particularly in the duet, Let Us Wander Not Unseen. Sometimes it's an advantage to sing with a sibling, a brother or a sister, as your voices might be more inclined to blend, but not always. So ways to work on this blend. You might consider singing a sustained note in a comfortable range for both of you on a specific vowel, and see if the sound is absolutely unified. You can change the vowel and see how that goes. You can look at your partner to see how they're shaping their mouth for that particular vowel. And experiment with different shapes. You know, is your E this way or this way? And see how that affects the tone and decide what is most pleasing or suitable to your duet. You can try singing the same vowel on 2 different pitches and again, keeping that same shape. It's really important thing is to listen to your partner. Of course, find a note or an interval in your actual duet with the word that you're having to sing on that note or interval, and practice that, listening to very carefully to the unison of the voice or the unity of the tone. The second thing that helps the blend is volume. Try to ensure that the voices are as equal as possible, unless one voice is supposed to be coming out over the other. So you can use recordings to help us determine that. Take a phrase that has a dynamic marking, like a crescendo, and practice it separately, making sure that you both have enough breath energy for increasing the volume without any strain. Again, listen to your partner and make sure that you are united and that one voice isn't overwhelming the other. Now, in terms of performing a duet, there can be quite a lot of variety in how you interpret and communicate its message. Do you add movement? Do you add a gesture? Do you interact with each other? It depends very much on the duet, how much you do of this. But I would say even non-dramatic duets, it should be clear that you are both thinking about the mood and the message of the lyrics with your facial expression and your eye focus. So let's talk first about gestures. 2 of the performances used gestures very effectively, which enhanced the mood and the story of the song. So it's of course important that you synchronize those gestures so that they're exactly together, if that's what you're intending. And that takes quite a lot of practice. The 2 duets that use the gestures, I was really impressed at how well you did this. It's also important that the gestures and movement don't overwhelm the singing, so that we're not being distracted from what the voices are doing by the gestures. So one suggestion, of course, is to practice, again, separately in front of a mirror, short sections of the song where you're going to use the gestures, and really consider whether they're appropriate or just put in there because someone has said, oh, you probably need a gesture. Movement, when you're singing a classical duet, is somewhat limited, but I still want to impress that it's important to feel the music in your body. If your bodies are too stiff and still, it inhibits the breath, and it also makes the voice feel a little tight. So make sure your knees are relaxed, and maybe whatever the rhythm of the song is, you can feel that easily in your bodies. People hear with their eyes. So if you stand very stiffly, they think, oh, this is a very serious and stiff performance. You might want to interact with your partner. Sometimes the duets demand that, like the duet Cold Snap by Mark Hayes, which was performed in these classes. It's almost a theatrical sketch, and it must have been such fun practicing it and putting it together. And it was certainly delightful to watch. But even in less dramatic duets, like Let Us Wander Not Unseen, I think you can, even if it's just in the introduction, connect to each other and on the play out as well, making sure that we realize you're not in your own world, that you're really united and together in your singing. One other thing to consider for performing duets is what to wear. All of the performers of these duets made an effort to coordinate their clothing. And now that isn't essential, but it somehow creates a sense of unity and decorum. And again, as I said, people hear with their eyes. So in classical duets, the ones that aren't from an opera or an operetta where you've got staging and costumes, as with choirs, it helps to focus the attention on the music if the audience isn't distracted by looking at very different elements of clothing. So I thought I might share with you some suggestions about repertoire from my personal library. The duets in these classes were sung by singers ages, I think 8 through 14. And so I know that many of you have anthologies of duets for that age range. And of course, there are many two-part choral arrangements that are suitable for young voices. So, the first duet, Let Us Wander Not Unseen, comes from this anthology, Easy Classical Duets, compiled by Joan Frey-Boyton, published by Hal Leonard, and there are lots of other duets in that anthology that would be suitable for you. Folk Songs for Two by J. Althouse, also full of familiar songs. Some of you may have sung from the conservatory repertoire. Skyboat Song, there's a really lovely duet arrangement of that in this anthology. Amazing Grace is a familiar one that you might want to explore as well. And now a couple of two-part arrangements that are my particular favorites. Flying Free, Don Bessig. It's an oldie but goodie. Of course, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Pia Jesu. The Evening Prayer from Engelbert Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel, often performed by young singers, and it's always still a really challenging but good choice for developing very strong harmonies. Now these last ones, there are a couple of duets by our Canadian composer Linda Fletcher, Song of Sharing and Softly Now, also one that I have but I didn't bring out, The Irish Blessing, really accessible for young developing voices, and I think you would enjoy them. And last but not least, another slightly older one by Nancy Telfer, Canadian composer, Dream of the Sea. So I'll just close by mentioning one final thing about performing, and this isn't just about duets. Any songs, remember to greet and leave your audience with a smile. Even if you're singing a song that is thoughtful or nostalgic, it's important that you show the audience how delighted you are to be sharing your talents with them. If you look too serious, they just assume that you're either uncomfortable or you don't want to be there. Obviously, you don't paste an insincere grin on your face, but my very first teacher's advice to me when I was, I think, 9 or 10 years old and just starting to sing in festivals was, when you walk on stage, you think in your mind, here I am, you lucky people. And I think all of you can absolutely adopt that phrase because your performances are excellent and remarkable. So I'd like to thank your teachers, your parents, your accompanists for their support and their direction. And I hope you all continue to make beautiful music together. And thank you again for sharing your talents in this festival.